The story behind the Exorcism of Emily Rose, 2005, is rooted in one of the most harrowing cases of exorcism in modern history, a chilling account of faith, suffering, and mystery. The film was inspired by the real-life ordeal of Anneliese Michel, a young German woman whose struggle with what her family and religious authorities believed to be demonic possession led to a series of brutal exorcisms, raising complex questions about belief, mental illness, and the power of faith. Her story is not only tragic but also endlessly controversial, touching on the boundaries between science and spirituality and the potential dangers when the two collide. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in the Bavarian town of Liebelfing, Germany, into a devout Catholic family. By all accounts, she was a kind, deeply religious girl, dedicated to her family and her faith. But at 16, her life took a disturbing turn when she began experiencing seizures and frightening visions. Diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy, a neurological condition known to cause seizures, hallucinations, and, in severe cases, psychotic symptoms, Anneliese was prescribed anticonvulsant medication, and over the next several years, she underwent a battery of medical treatments. But her symptoms persisted and, in fact, intensified. As time went on, Anneliese's experiences grew stranger. She began to feel a powerful, dark presence around her, and it became increasingly oppressive. She reported seeing terrifying faces that would mock her, whispering hateful things. At times, she would go rigid with fear, and her body would convulse uncontrollably. She heard voices, cruel, menacing voices, that told her she was damned, that she would rot in hell. Her health continued to deteriorate despite medication, and her family grew increasingly concerned as Anneliese's behavior took a sinister turn. Anneliese began showing an extreme aversion to religious symbols, which deeply troubled her devout family. She couldn't bear to look at a crucifix, and she felt physically sick when she tried to enter a church. Her family was desperate for answers, and, believing her symptoms might be beyond the reach of medicine, they turned to the church, seeking the help of priests who could intervene spiritually. To them, this was no longer a simple medical case, it was something far darker. The initial reaction from the church was one of caution. Exorcisms in the Catholic Church are rare and highly controlled, usually only performed after thorough investigation, and only in cases where possession is deemed undeniable. But after observing her symptoms firsthand, a priest, Father Ernst Alt, grew convinced that Anneliese was possessed. He petitioned the Bishop of Würzburg to authorize an exorcism, and, reluctantly, the church eventually granted permission. Two priests, Father Alt and Father Arnold Renz, were assigned to conduct the exorcisms. What followed was a series of 67 exorcisms over 10 grueling months, each session more intense and disturbing than the last. The rites adhered strictly to the Rituale Romanum, the traditional Catholic ritual for exorcism, invoking the names of saints and commanding the demons to leave. But as the sessions went on, Anneliese's behavior grew more violent and erratic. She screamed, spoke in voices not her own, voices that were low, guttural, and often spoke in languages Anneliese did not know, including Latin and ancient Greek. She contorted her body into horrifying, unnatural positions, displaying physical strength far beyond her own. She would snarl and growl, and her voice would change to that of a man's, taunting the priests and mocking their prayers. Anneliese's family and the priests claimed that she was possessed by multiple demons, and during exorcism sessions, she would name each of them. Some of the demons identified themselves as figures from history, such as Nero, Cain, Judas, and even Lucifer himself. She would refer to herself in the plural, we instead of I, and she spoke of the torment within her as if she were merely a vessel, overrun by dark forces. Her violent fits were punctuated by moments of clarity, during which she would plead for the rituals to continue, believing that her suffering had meaning and that she was enduring these torments for the salvation of others. Throughout the ordeal, Anneliese refused to eat, claiming that the demons inside her wouldn't allow it. Her family watched in horror as her body became increasingly frail, her weight plummeting, her once vibrant face hollowed and haunted. She was covered in bruises, wounds, and cuts, some inflicted by herself in moments of intense distress, as she threw herself to the ground, bit her own limbs, or struck her head against walls. The exorcisms took a devastating toll on her, but her conviction in the righteousness of her suffering never wavered. She believed she was doing God's work, battling demons on behalf of humanity, and her unwavering faith only made the situation more complex. By the spring of 1976, Anneliese was emaciated, weak, and gravely ill. Yet she continued to endure the exorcisms, with both her family and the priests hoping for a miraculous breakthrough. But by July 1, 1976, her body could no longer withstand the strain. Anneliese Michel died in her home, just 23 years old, from malnutrition and dehydration. The official cause of death was ruled as the result of starvation, yet for those closest to her, the explanation was not so simple. Her death was both a tragedy and a catalyst for intense public scrutiny. Her passing led to an investigation, and ultimately, her parents and the two priests were charged with negligent homicide. The trial that followed drew international attention, as journalists, theologians, and medical experts all weighed in on the question: was Anneliese Michel truly possessed, or was she a tragically misunderstood young woman suffering from severe mental illness? The defense argued that Anneliese's symptoms defied conventional medical explanations, pointing to her aversion to religious symbols, her strange voices, and her physical contortions as evidence of genuine possession. The priests testified that they had done all they could to help her, relying on their faith and the sacred rites of the church. The prosecution, however, argued that Anneliese's condition required medical treatment, not exorcism, and that her death was preventable. They painted a tragic picture of a vulnerable young woman abandoned by science and led down a path that cost her life. Expert witnesses suggested that her symptoms were consistent with schizophrenia and that her experiences, including the voices and visions, were likely due to her epilepsy and psychotic episodes. Her refusal to eat was seen as a manifestation of her illness, exacerbated by her belief that she was under demonic control. The trial became a landmark case, forcing society to confront the boundaries between religion and science, between faith and reason. In the end, the court convicted her parents and the priests of manslaughter by negligence, sentencing them to 6 months in prison, later suspended, and 3 years of probation. To some, this was a miscarriage of justice, a condemnation of faith in the face of the unknown. To others, it was a stark reminder of the dangers of fanaticism and the need for compassion and mental health treatment. Anneliese Michel's life and death remain a point of fascination and debate. Her grave has become a place of pilgrimage for those who believe she was a martyr or saint, her suffering a testament to her faith. Yet her story also serves as a sobering reminder of the need for discernment and the dangers that can arise when spiritual beliefs override medical intervention. The Exorcism of Emily Rose takes inspiration from Anneliese's story, blending courtroom drama with supernatural horror to explore the terrifying possibility of possession and the chilling ambiguity of her case. It presents the question that haunted Anneliese's family, the priests, and her community: was she truly possessed, or was her condition a severe manifestation of mental illness misunderstood by those who loved her? Through Emily's character, the film captures the horror, suffering, and faith that defined Anneliese's tragic life. Anneliese's story endures, serving as a haunting testament to the complexities of faith, the limits of science, and the mysteries of the human mind. It raises uncomfortable questions about the role of religion in dealing with mental illness, about the fine line between faith and fanaticism, and about the human need to find meaning in suffering. The Exorcism of Emily Rose leaves us grappling with these questions, inviting us to confront the darkest corners of belief, the power of conviction, and the heartbreaking consequences that can follow when belief and reality collide.